People who had COVID-19 or know someone who did. How bad was it? My mom had COVID. Started as a fever, then quickly worsened. Within days she was in the hospital on oxygen. Seriously thought she was going to die. My dad has COVID. He has zero symptoms and probably had it 4 days before the results. My dad is diabetic with kidney failure and multiple other health issues. Why my mother, who's mostly healthy, reacted so badly compared to my dad is uttering bewildering. 30-year-old friend had it. He was so sick that his roommates were almost afraid to check on him in his room because they thought they'd find him dead. Getting out of bed to go to the bathroom took all of his strength. He's fine now, but it took a few weeks for his lungs to feel even remotely normal. My grandmother got it in her late 80s and in a nursing home. She probably weighs 70 pounds and can barely sit up on the best of days. She had a fever for a week and a mild cough, then recovered. We are shocked. She's so weak that when the home told us she had it, we all thought she had no chance of beating it. Weird how it can kill strong healthy people, but somehow spare her. I'm 32 and it was the sickest I have ever been. 2 weeks of fever over 101. Bad cough that lasted almost a month. Shortness of breath where, if I walked more than a few steps I would end up doubled over gasping for air. It was pretty bad, but at least I'm all better now. All the edits, damn that blew up in the few hours I was asleep. Thank you to everyone for everything. My general condition before this was good. No underlying conditions. I was in really good shape. In the gym mostly every day. Yeah, it really sucked. I was never really in fear though, because I caught it early enough that it wasn't really hyped that much. I think it was March 3rd that I went to the hospital. I work as an Uber driver on the weekends, so I'm guessing that's how I caught it. I was on an inhaler for a while afterwards. I tried working out about 3 weeks after I initially got sick. That was a joke. I literally ended up on my back wheezing and hacking 2 minutes into the workout. I'm pretty much fully recovered now. The only effects I'm still feeling are just from taking so much time off from working out. I think that's the gist of most of the questions. If you have a burning one that I didn't answer, I'm sorry. Feel free to ask me again. One more super important edit. Everything I have seen and read about this is that it affects everyone differently. Please don't read what I didn't think that it's great advice or anything like that. I would hate for someone to get worse because they listen to my dumbass on Reddit. Please listen to your doctors. Just heard this morning that a friend of mine died last night. Her partner called 911 when she took a turn for the worse, and in the time it took the EMTs to get there she'd already passed. It was that quick. She'd been tested, knew she was positive. She was told to stay at home unless her symptoms got worse. She felt sick, but not rushed to the hospital sick until last night. I'm trying to comfort myself knowing she'd rather die in her own bed than in a hospital surrounded by strangers. My mum went from minor tickling throat to being taken away in an ambulance by people in hazmat 3 days later unable to breathe. 2 weeks later she died. No major health issues. She was sedated as soon as she went into hospital and on a ventilator for the duration. Eventually her organs started failing and there was nothing else they could do other than turn the ventilator off and let her go. My sister, who was 47 with no underlying health issues, passed away from COVID-19. It took 10 days. She was in the hospital for the last 3. The scary part is she was making a recovery. Her lungs at day 7 were operating at 83%, and after 2 days in the hospital she had got them to 95%. In 29 hours it was a complete 180. I was able to text with her. She kept saying she was having a really tough time, but didn't go into much detail. My brother-in-law and 2 nephews also had it. He mistakenly thought his COVID was just from a good gym workout, as his body was just really sore. My nephew, age 13, puked one night and had a fever for a few hours. The youngest, age 7, never had any symptoms and felt fine. All tested positive. IQ nurse checking in. I just got cleared to go back to work tomorrow after testing positive a couple weeks ago. How bad was it compared to the COVID patients I've treated? Nothing. I didn't even have a fever or shortness of breath. Our IQ patients are so sick. All the things you've heard about on the news. Hypoxia, blood clots, multi-system organ failure, We've had many people in their 30s and 40s with no pre-existing conditions who've ended up just as sick as the 80-year-olds, and many of them haven't had good outcomes. Sadly, I work at a major hospital where we routinely get the sickest patients transferred to us from smaller hospitals, so I realize I'm seeing the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, but it is scary. My symptoms were all so minor and non-specific that I blew them off or chalked them up to other things: spring allergies, dry hospital air, sleeping poorly on my shitty mattress, working overtime for several days until I realized I'd completely, profoundly lost my sense of smell and taste. That's when I knew I had to get tested. Lo and behold, it was positive. It sucked, but I'm very grateful I wasn't any sicker than I was, and especially that I have health insurance and work at a place that paid for my covered specific sick leave as well as having paid sick leave in general. I know there are so many other people out there who don't have such a safety net, and it seems very unfair. My sister was an extremely healthy non-smoker who works at a prominent hospital. She was exposed to one of the hospital's first corona patients weeks and weeks ago, when naivety was very much a thing and precaution wasn't taken very seriously. The patient tested negative, but then positive after her exposure. She didn't take the same precautions because he tested negative when he was in fact positive. She certainly contracted the virus despite testing negative twice. She was ungodly sick, and even weeks and weeks later she's still using an inhaler and has a lasting cough and perhaps lung inflammation and damage. She's 31. Dad got infected after going in and out of the hospital for his 4th brain surgery because the doctors keep messing up. After testing positive, the hospital sent him home, so he infected mom also. After passing, for some reason, they sent his body home. But nobody can touch it because of the possibility of getting infected. After dad's passing, mom went to the hospital to get tested. She already knew she just wanted treatment, but was sent home. She collapsed while walking to her car. They admitted her, but only gave her IV, told her she was positive, then sent her home again. It's been rough. I've had 4 people in my life pass from it so far. Former coworker and friend was one of the first people in the US to die from it. He was 34 years old and only had childhood asthma. A great friend and collaborator I had just stayed with a month before. He was 39 years old and no pre-existing conditions. My best friend's mother, who was like a second mother to me. She was 63 years old with no pre-existing conditions. My grandmother, who was in a nursing home. She was 90 and was relatively healthy for her age. All passed within 2 weeks of showing symptoms. With the exception of my grandma, they all were home for the first week, then were admitted to the hospital as their conditions worsened. I'm a MD in a designated COVID-19 center. 15% of pregnant patients here have COVID-19. Of those positive patients, 87% are completely asymptomatic. We just admitted another one half an hour ago. She looks fine. It's good that so many don't get real sick, but it's scary because they are likely walking around spreading it. My best friend had it and was non-stop coughing with fevers to 103, 6 and every flu-like symptom you could imagine for about 3 weeks with a slow recovery. Said it was horrible. Terrible cough when I was FaceTiming him. One of my co-residents had it and felt like hell for about 2 weeks. Cough, fever, body aches. 2 family friends in their 60s has it and were laid out at home for about 5 weeks. One was kinda stuck in bed and the other weekly supported the 2 until they improved on their own. The common thing I hear is that it's like a horrible fever that just stays and stays and stays. You keep thinking you turned the curve, but the next day you're still sick until it runs its course. The really sick patients in the hospital it was really horrible for a long time. Things have slowed down thanks to social distancing and all the precautionary measures. I'm worried about going backwards though, because the people in my area are walking around without masks or their nose out. Everybody has a reason for going out or not wearing a mask. The virus does not care what your reason is. It does not care. My roommate got sick about 6 weeks ago. It wasn't until a couple weeks ago that he got his sense of smell back. He was barely able to get out of bed for weeks and would have terrible coughing fits. By the way, I should mention that he's 22 and a collegiate athlete. He was probably in about as good of shape as a person can be in. Before he got sick, my girlfriend got sick too. It wasn't quite as bad for her, but one day her fever registered at 104, and I was freaking out. Friend had minor symptoms, but the virus triggered an aneurysm. Now he'll miss 6 months of work getting his full speech and writing skills back. Edited to at, apparently this needs to be spelled out, even though I haven't run into this problem anywhere else when discussing COVID-19. Missing work is bad. Why? Because my friend, like most people, needs a paycheck for rent, food and medical care. I know this will shock those of you who are either independently wealthy or 12 years old. He also just wants to get back to work, so life can be normal again. Doubly so because this was a new job after a lengthy time out of work after layoffs. His speech has greatly improved, which is how I know all this, because he talks to me on the phone, but writing is so-so. He is otherwise just fine, though still understandably angry that it was a cluster getting a damn COVID test. I posted here, so people would be aware that some patients are having aneurysms. COVID is also producing blood clots in some patients, triggering strokes. These are subsets of health impacts from a virus that virologists, epidemiologists, and others are still learning about. The word friend, in particular, should be a clue that I value my friend not as a supposed cog in the wheel of injustice that is capitalism, but because I love him. I hope this helps those of you who found my original post too difficult to understand. Edited again to make small clarification that aneurysms and strokes are both happening. For more info on either, please consult someone who has more training than my degree in English. My trainer at the gym had it. She is an ordinarily healthy woman in her 40s and very fit. She had high fever. It was hard to breathe, exhaustion and brutal muscle aches. She found it hard to walk across her bedroom. She lost her sense of smell also. Suspected neurological symptoms too, memory problems and trouble finding words. 3 weeks after her quarantine ended, she still feels like sh*t. She is out of breath very easily. I saw her loading groceries into her car, and it was hard for her. She is still having memory problems. She recovered at home, no hospital. My father died of COVID-19. Yes, he was in a nursing home, and he was a Vietnam veteran. I know he is finally at peace. He was a sniper. He passed away on Easter Sunday at about 6 AM Eastern Time for USA. It took only 3 days. He spiked the temperature. From what I was told, he had a false negative. My father was not well. Basically, he tried to drink himself out of his nightmares. Thinking of Dad, thank you for your service. A friend had it. He's okay now, but it was scary for a bit. He said it was pretty much like a bad case of the flu until one night he spiked a high fever and started having problems breathing. It was like 1 hour he was fine and the next he had to be hospitalized. He ended up on a ventilator for almost a week. Thankfully he's doing okay now, and he's recovering at home. His family also ended up sick, but they didn't need to be hospitalized. This virus is hitting everyone differently. For some it's like an average bout of the flu. Some people have severe symptoms, while others have minor and varying symptoms. Some people are asymptomatic. Some people need to be put on ventilators, and unfortunately we are losing a lot of people as well. I wouldn't wish this uncertainty on anyone. 1 minute your loved one is fine, just feeling a little under the weather. The next minute they might need to be hospitalized. You never know if they are going to bounce back or not. The virus doesn't care how old or how generally healthy you are, it will kick your butt if it wants to. Our 28 years old daughter is an RN. They didn't have adequate PPE, and she was infected from a patient. Hospitalized for 5 days, pumped full of steroids, horrible coughing and scared the shot out of her. We couldn't even visit. She's out and back to work watching patients die weekly while more and Republicans scream that it's no big deal and Mr. Orange Bonespa says it magically going away. Fucking insane. They should spend some time helping these people. It got pretty bad for about 5 days. Cough, fever, chill/hot flashes, dizziness, and body aches. Overly tired and worn down. Weirdest thing was not being able to taste anything. Never did lose my sense of smell. Gradually got better after the bad days. Unfortunately my boyfriend got it as well, but we quarantined and got through it together. I consider myself fortunate because the person I got it from is still in the hospital on oxygen. It's scary how it can affect so many people so differently. Stay safe everyone. My best friend currently has been diagnosed and I have yet to hear back from her. She lives an hour 27 minutes away and it's not easy to just go check on or help her. I have very high risk with my medical problems. Praying for her though. She's a strong person and a precious friend. I know she's got to be struggling right now. I will try and post update when I know more on her condition. I'm sorry, I know my post doesn't exactly do much help in the way of describing what it's like. But when I do know more into her well-being I can provide that. God bless anyone out there struggling with this virus. My heart goes out to you all. I'm a frontline RN. It can truly be as bad as they are talking about. This is not just a bad flu. I have worked during bad flu seasons and never seen anything like this. It is very unusual how it affects everyone so differently. Many people can recover at home, but there really are a lot of people who need to be admitted and require respiratory support and fever control. The fevers tend to run very high for a few, 104 plus, and acetaminophen doesn't help, but not everyone gets fevers and some that do respond to acetaminophen. Not everyone who catch this is going to get extremely sick, but they can transmit it to someone who will. I have seen more deaths during this personally than in the last 4 years combined. It has been very sad.